My guest today is a doctor, an author, and a brave patriot who stood up not just for the health and safety of her patients, but for common sense during the COVID crisis. Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. Dr. Bowden, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. Now, a lot of people know about you. You've got a huge following on social media. People can follow you on X by going to at Mary Bowden MD. You've written a book called Dangerous Misinformation. You are one of the people who got censored and banned and all kinds of crazy stuff. You started Americans for Health Freedom. Before we get too deep into the conversation, can you give us just a bit of background for the people who perhaps haven't seen you before?
Yeah, I practice in Houston, Texas. I'm a solo ear, nose, and throat doctor. I sort of stumbled into the pandemic. I just started treating patients when they showed up and became controversial because I spoke out initially against the mandates, and I started treating patients with ivermectin. And I stepped on the toes of the first hospital in the country to mandate the COVID shots. So that was Houston Methodist Hospital. They announced on April 1st, 2021, they were going to make all of their employees and all of the doctors that had privileges at their hospital take the shot. And I just started speaking out against the mandates, and they went after me very viciously, very publicly. They tried to destroy my reputation. And in response to that, I sued them for defamation, which is how the two of us connected, because I used the attorney that I guess is going after you, Stephen Biss. Unfortunately, he had a stroke in the midst of my battle against Methodist, and I ended up losing that case. But I'm still at it with Methodist because despite the fact that we entered into a settlement agreement, they cashed a very large check I wrote them. They are asking for more money. So we have a hearing in the beginning of February to go over that.
Wow, I didn't realize that detail. So there are a lot of details to your legal battle. You had another case here against the Department of Health where you really were sort of vindicated, weren't you?
Yes, that was a big, big win because we sued the government and won, which is very hard to do. We sued the FDA over the misinformation that they put out on social media regarding ivermectin. So they put out the infamous horse tweet, which is that attractive healthcare worker nuzzling the horse. And you don't really need the caption, but it says, seriously, y'all, you're not a horse, you're not a cow, stop it. And that tweet went viral, and it had a huge impact on my ability to get ivermectin to my patients, on everybody's ability. It followed with a big smear campaign against Joe Rogan. Unfortunately, the misbranding of ivermectin as horse dewormer still stands. We did succeed in forcing the FDA to remove the misinformation they put on their website and on social media. But honestly, I would like them, now that we have a new FDA, I would like them to correct the record and put out some correct information on ivermectin, let the public know that it is more than just horse dewormer. It's very safe. It's been used in billions of people around the world. It won a Nobel Prize in medicine. It's on the WHO's list of most important medications. And they don't have to say what you can use it for, because that's not really their role. And that was an important point of the lawsuit, is that the FDA is not supposed to give the public and not supposed to direct doctors on clinical information on how to treat patients. Their role is to approve medications and move on. They're not supposed to tell people, okay, you should take this for that, or doctors, you can prescribe this for that. The new administration, as much as, I'm a supporter of them compared to the prior administration, they're still sort of engaging in this. They're being very public facing with how they went on a big campaign about hormones recently. which I don't agree with. I think we need to see a little less of the FDA out in the public. I'd like them to just do their job and make sure our drugs and our food are safe. But I don't think that we need more information from the government on how to be healthy and how to treat our medical problems.
I mean, that really was unprecedented, right? I mean, for the government to be telling doctors what to do, the whole purpose of having a doctor is that you see these patients, you evaluate everybody on an individual basis, and using your skill and experience and training and intuition as a medical professional, you diagnose and treat the patient. You're not looking to the government to tell you how to do your job. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, and prior to the pandemic, I don't think we really had seen that. I mean, I never gave these three-letter agencies any space in my mind before the pandemic. I really didn't I never looked at the FDA's website prior to the pandemic. I never looked at the CDC's website prior to the pandemic. We weren't trained to look to the government to guide our medical decision making. That's not part of the curriculum. The FDA, like I said, they have a role to make sure our drugs are safe and make sure our food is safe, but that's it. Um, and unfortunately, during the pandemic, they overstepped their boundaries. The lawsuit was good because it did set a precedent. It put them back in their lane, and so if they try to do something like that again, there is already something in the books where that can be cited to keep them from doing it again. But like I said, practically speaking, ivermectin is still considered controversial when it shouldn't be. Now, there are 5 states in the country that have made it somewhat over the counter. So you still have to go through a pharmacist to get it. But you don't need a prescription from a doctor. Ideally, I'd love to see the FDA just make it over the counter so you could find it next to the Tylenol bottle, because it is literally safer than Tylenol. And people are going to the feed store still. They're ordering it from other countries, which seems to be safe because I think if it weren't, we'd be seeing a lot of problems. But this is America, and we shouldn't have to go to the feed store to get our medications.
Tractor Supply instead of Dwayne Reed. But so in this, it's basically a settlement, really, because I'm not deeply familiar with it, but I read this document that was from March of 2024, where in exchange for your agreement to dismiss the claims in the case, the defendant, the Food and Drug Administration, had agreed within 21 days to retire the update why you should not use. And they did. They deleted that tweet. They did a bunch of things. Have they satisfied all of these requirements?
As far as I know, our counsel was very thorough, very meticulous, and they modified what they put on their website. I haven't checked it in a long time, but I remember at the time thinking, well, this is fine. Technically, they have met the requirements, but they are, it's not as far as I would like to see. Like they really just need to come out and set the record straight on this drug that is so safe and should not be controversial. And Americans should be able to access it easily, not have to go to the feed store to get it.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, your fight continues. People can watch. You've got a podcast. You're on X at Mary Bowden, MD. You've written a book. People can get your book from Amazon or other retailers that aren't controlled by the CIA, but it's called Dangerous Misinformation, the Virus, the Treatments, and the Lies. And you are also the founder of Americans for Health Freedom. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes. So we have our foundational project. We are a fairly new organization. We're a 501c4. But I ran across on X a representative from Michigan, Brad Paquette, who had myocarditis following the shots. And he's fairly young. He's in his 30s. And I reached out to him just on X and said, would you be willing to state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market? And he wholeheartedly responded yes. And that just gave me the courage to ask more politicians to make that statement. And so our project is to get politicians, either candidates or people in office, to simply state that the COVID shot should be pulled off the market. And to me, this is a litmus test because it's such a hot potato. No, politicians do not want to make that statement, even though I highly doubt any of them continue to get these shots or would never let their children get these shots, yet they're willing to let their constituents get these shots. So to me, it's a litmus test. It's a sign of courage and integrity. And we don't financially back them. We give them free marketing. So I have a large X account. We are about to start our own, X account for this entity, Americans for Health Freedom. But our goal is to give them marketing and also just educate the public about the harms of these shots, because at this point they are seriously all risk. There's no benefit. And sadly, 5.5 million children have gotten the latest version of this shot. It's hard to believe. And another 5 million parents have said they definitely plan on giving their children these shots. Another 20 million are considering it strongly. So, a lot of people say it's their choice. Eliminating mandates is enough. Well, I strongly disagree, because children don't have a choice and they should not be playing Russian roulette with children's health. I mean, I continue, unfortunately, to see patients injured from these shots on a daily basis in my office. I have people crying in my office regularly because these shots have completely destroyed their health. And I still see patients who are getting coerced and pressured into getting these shots, even now, from their primary care doctors, and then having severe side effects because of that. So it's still going on. It's still a problem. The government really needs to pull these shots off the market.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. So let's get a little bit into the whole thing that sort of connected you and I, this issue with Stephen Biss. So you had sued Houston Methodist Hospital, but Stephen Biss, he practices in Virginia. What, if you don't mind me asking, brought Stephen Biss to your attention?
He was referred to me by Robert Malone. So I was very new at all this, and Robert Malone was using him for his defamation lawsuits. I later found out that Stella Emanuel also used him for her defamation lawsuits. Unfortunately, none of us were successful. We all lost our lawsuits.
Yeah, and you know what? I actually have spoken with Dr. Malone about this. He and I got off on the wrong foot, but we've corrected that because, see, Stephen Biss, everybody who watches Crowdsource the Truth knows, has been after me or had been after me since 2017. And Dr. Malone was initially, when I first contacted him, he was getting sued by another malicious individual named George Webb. And when I contacted Dr. Malone to try to warn him about that, his response to me caused me to believe that Dr. Malone was involved with Stephen Biss. I now have come to understand that Dr. Malone was a victim of Stephen Biss, and I'm confident that he recommended Biss to you in good faith. But see, these lawfare attorneys are very underhanded, and Biss is not the only one that I've encountered. By the way, I should say, everything I'm saying here, this is my opinion. Dr. Bowden, of course, does not endorse anything that I say, and some of the things that I'm saying haven't even been proven in court. These are my pure opinions about these people, like Stephen Biss and other attorneys who I allege are lawfare operatives. But one of the key things, the modus operandi that I have observed, is that one method is to become your lawyer and to gain your trust and then sabotage the case from the inside. Can you speak to that at all? Did you observe anything in dealing with Stephen Biss that makes you think that he might have done something like that?
Well, he was very cantankerous. I've never been yelled at by an attorney, but he would get very mad very angry, short tempered. It was weird. And then, I lost on a technicality. I didn't sign my affidavit, and apparently they reached
Whoa.
out to him to try to correct the
Whoa.
problem. And so I ended up having to pay Methodist $166,000
Wow.
because I didn't sign my affidavit. Um, and yeah, he had a stroke in the midst of all this, and my new attorney felt like it just was throwing more money away by taking it any further. But
Wow.
I don't
Well,
know.
no, you see, that's interesting because, like I said, I had a similar experience with a completely different attorney, nothing to do with COVID, but they mung up the case so badly that no other attorney can even wade into that quagmire because it's like, the house is so burned to the ground. We're not going to rebuild this. We just have to salt the earth and move on to another location. So, wow. So wait a minute. So you didn't sign an affidavit. That's amazing that a judge wouldn't say, well, okay, now wait a minute. Let's just back up and allow this. I mean, it's not like you're some homeless person on the street. You're a medical doctor and they won't even allow you any leeway on something technical like that. But so they attempted to contact Biss. And this was before he had the stroke, and he couldn't correct a minor problem like that. That does seem like deliberate interference to me.
Or just blatant malpractice. I can't, I looked into possibly suing him for malpractice, but he's holed away in a nursing home now, apparently. And he doesn't have any partners. I did manage to reach his receiver, but that was sort of a dead end. So, and he was getting ready to help me sue somebody else. I actually had just sent him $10,000 to help me sue somebody else. So that's gone as well.
What was the nature of that case, if I may ask?
I hate to even give her any attention, but there's this nasty pharmacist, our exorcist, who, I mean, her modus operandi is to just destroy people. I mean, that's all she does online is go after people. And I became her target. And she was just relentless. And she has an army of people. She's associated with this very shady guy, too, whose name is now escaping me. But somebody just sent me an article about him. Let me get that, because
It's
it might
interesting
be.
because, and this is a network of people. So you and I initially connected when you saw this post that I put up in February of 2025, which is a phone call that I had with Elliot Park, who was, I guess he was the receiver, the conservator. What was this guy? He was doing something with Stephen Biss's cases when Stephen Biss, right, here's a letter from Elliot Park. So this guy was, this letter basically back in December of 2023 informed me that Stephen Biss suffered a debilitating stroke in August of 2023, and the Charlottesville Circuit Court appointed Elliot Park as the receiver. And sometime between Biss's stroke and his appointment, Mr. Biss's office was sort of broken into, leaving files or allegedly leaving files in gross disarray and possibly removing files and other items. Now, there's a lot of suspicion surrounding this break-in, and there's apparently a laptop that is missing. Do you know if any of your files, I mean, obviously you were his client. It makes sense that your information is at risk here. Has anybody, the police or anybody, contacted you about this? Anything?
No, I had no idea about a lab. I was just told there were no files. There's no, I mean, and this is all coming from Robert Malone. And basically I told so there was a pro hoc vice, a Texas attorney who was involved in the case. I reached out to him. I gave him Elliot Park's contact, or I gave him somebody else's contact information, who then told me to reach out to Elliot Park. And then I haven't heard anything back since then. So I didn't know about a laptop at all.
And Elliott Park just bizarrely went missing. A viewer of Crowdsource The Truth contacted me and said that their child was a law school student at, I think, William and Mary Law School might have been where he was teaching. And he just one day kind of disappeared. Nobody knows where he went. The law school wouldn't tell me anything about him. And I mean, you and I are basically just two people kind of looking through a keyhole trying to put together details in this mysterious case. I had discovered a huge number of really dilapidated looking Virginia properties that were associated with Stephen Biss that I have a lot of questions about. Could have been related to some of this mortgage fraud type stuff that I have found. I'm not saying I have evidence of that. I'm saying it could have been related because there were so many properties that were so suspiciously crappy. It didn't seem like, if you own 5 condos in New Jersey or something, that seems like an investment, but you have these dilapidated office buildings in the most rural, ridiculous areas of Virginia. What is that? I don't understand. But we have seen other people, not Stephen Biss, engage in mortgage scams where they just get any old property at all, take out a mortgage, somebody else is paying that mortgage, and the individual just keeps the money and does whatever. It seems to be a way that I have observed for unscrupulous individuals to be essentially paid or bribed or whatever. And again, this is another kind of tactic of Lawfare where, the attorney who represented me, I believe, was being paid by other people to sink my case. And I say that because this attorney's only other client was Felix Sater, who is the Russian-American real estate developer who was trying to get Donald Trump to create Trump Tower Moscow and was very involved in the whole Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, all of that. So there's things that happen in these Lawfare cases. I believe, Dr. Bowden, that you were targeted. These are very powerful pharmaceutical companies and hospitals that don't want you or anyone with a message like the message that you have and the high degree of credibility that you have. They don't want people like you to get onto social media and to develop an audience of 600,000. I mean, just a few years ago, to have this type of audience, you would have needed to go to, NBC or Discovery Channel or something and get your own show. There were a real limited number of people who could have had this kind of reach, and there was kind of a built-in mechanism for controlling. If you were on, let's say, Discovery Channel or NBC, and suddenly you started saying, hey, don't take the COVID shot, use ivermectin, they'd say, well, Dr. Bowden, you're fired. And that's the end of that. So they want to control the ability for people like you or other people who have ideas that are sort of off script. They want to stop you from being able to put these ideas out there. And I think that Lawfare is one of the key ways that they do it.
It definitely felt, a little bit like sabotage. I mean, it was such a minor error that could have been corrected and wasn't. And very frustrating, but I do have a little hope against Methodists because we are asking for sanctions against Methodists and their lawyers for the way they've handled our settlement agreement because they've pulled a bait and switch. They told us the deal is on, they cashed my check, and then I tweeted something about them that they didn't like, and all of a sudden they're asking me now for $26,000. So apparently the law firm Yetter Coleman is a little bit rankled by all this. They're pretty upset that I would dare ask for sanctions against them. So that makes me happy that I've ruffled their feathers, but we'll see.
I hope that goes well for you. I mean, it definitely seems like it's hard to get justice in court, whether it's Texas or New York or Washington, D.C. It's very troubling. And I mean, you see Donald Trump, he's a billionaire. He's the president of the United States. You're a doctor, well established in the community, obviously have the financial resources to pay attorneys. It's daunting to the average person who thinks that the courts are there to, no one is above the law and the equal scales of justice and all that kind of thing. Had you ever, I know doctors are frequently the targets, even honest doctors are frequently the targets of malicious lawsuits from dealing with the public and all that kind of stuff. Had you ever been in court before any of this?
no, nothing like this. I was completely blindsided by this. Was not a public figure. And, even though I was on X, but I had, I'd get like 2 likes. I'd post something and I said things like ivermectin works and vaccine mandates are wrong. I was quite conservative about what I said compared to what I'll say now. So yeah, it was very distressing when that happened. They Houston Methodist went straight to the media. I found out that I was suspended by a reporter at the Houston Chronicle. I got a text message and I remember, so I was like, what are you talking about? No, because they said, is it true? Can you confirm that your privileges have been suspended based on comments you've made on social media? And I did a double take and I have all the text. I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Check your sources. And then I get texts about, oh, Methodist is tweeting about you and CNN's talking about you. And I had, people screaming at me from Australia, calling me pond scum and sister of the devil. And it
Whoa.
was fierce. So that's why I sued them. I mean, they didn't, talk to me privately and say, maybe you should stop doing this. They tried to destroy me. And
Wow.
the other thing is, I was not a revenue source for them at all. I had never admitted a patient to their hospital. So I was expendable. I guarantee you, if I had been the chief of cardiothoracic surgery, they would not have gone after me in that regard. So they were using me to set an example to silence other doctors.
Oh my gosh. Well, so you're describing a malicious media campaign, and I'll offer this in response to what you've just said, because I've never been in the medical profession, but I've been in other professions. And I think, like to what you just said about if you were the head of cardiac thoracic surgery, I don't think you get to that position unless they have otherwise detected that you are the type of person who will do what you're told and go along to get along and all that. An independent thinker like yourself, who's in private practice and doesn't necessarily refer a lot of patients to that hospital, it's like you can't sit with us kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and it didn't always used to be like that. I mean, some of the, thorniest doctors I trained with were, cardiothoracic surgeons or neurosurgeons, really tough surgeons that wouldn't put up with kind of BS from hospital administrators. But I don't know if that's still the case. We're in a different world now.
Yeah.
But when I was in training, there were definitely doctors that would have stood up to all this.
Wow. You're right, though. We are in a different world. And again, I think that people from other professions can relate, because I've spoken to police officers. I've spoken to all kinds of different people from all kinds of different professions. It's so strange, Dr. Bowden. We've never seen anything like this. I mean, I guess it's that when people's health is threatened, and I mean, you must experience this every day. You said people are crying in your office and things like that. It's a very unique experience that if people haven't had it, when your health fails you, there's a fear that I think is unmatched by anything else.
Well, I agree. I mean, fear motivates people probably more than any other emotion, I would think. And unfortunately, but the government stoked that fear instead of, letting doctors handle it. And, they basically invaded the patient-physician relationship and stoked fears that were completely unnecessary. I mean, I had some very sick patients during COVID, but everybody that I treated early survived, and I learned a lot. But I didn't learn anything from the government. It was all from, treating thousands of patients. And when you treat, I don't think I'll ever have an experience like this in my career where, I mean, all I did was treat COVID patients for several years. And so you become an expert, what works and what doesn't. But unfortunately, the government was telling everybody what to do from the safety of their bedrooms over Zoom calls. They had no firsthand experience.
Right.
It's very frustrating.
I realize that Houston and Austin are quite far apart, but did you have anything to do with Joe Rogan's treatment, or have you spoken with him or his doctors? Or maybe you can't tell us that if it's HIPAA stuff. I don't know.
Well, I was on his show and
Ah,
we did talk about it. But yeah, they went after him. He was sort of they branded him as the crazy one taking ivermectin, and he was definitely used in their smear campaign. And it was very deliberate, and he was chosen for a purpose. But thankfully, he fought back pretty hard and made them look like complete idiots.
yeah. Well, see, because it's interesting, like what you were just saying before about how it was a media campaign against you, that sort of gets into, my profession, media, and fear amplified through media. Joe Rogan, obviously, media mogul. I mean, he's one of the most famous people in media. Yeah, I've seen you on there. I should have remembered that. But yeah, he is tough for sure. I mean, the guy's like a tree trunk, so he was the perfect person to stand up to them and fight this. But even with his huge reach, as you've said, people still think it's horse toothpaste or whatever they think it is, worm, whatever. It's crazy.
Yeah, there was an art. So there's a publication called Medscape, and I subscribe to them because I want to know what the other side is thinking. And literally, I think it was 2 days ago, they came out with an article about ivermectin again, and basically saying, "Oh, it's great for river blindness, but all these people that think it cures cancer and cures COVID are complete nutbags." I mean, it's still going on. It's really unbelievable.
Yeah, it is particularly unbelievable in light of the fact that you don't need to be a doctor to recognize that there are so many instances of years after a drug is discovered, they figure out, oh, well, Rogaine helps you grow your hair back or something. There's all these off-label treatments for things that do things that maybe they never intended to have it do. Just to get back to the Lawfare aspect for a moment, there was some more to this Stephen Biss story that I think you and I were just discussing briefly before we began, which is, again, it goes back to media. Stephen Biss seemed very focused on suing people in the media. He represented Devin Nunes and Dan Bongino, notably, who now is a big investor in Rumble. Of course, he was the FBI general counsel. We'll talk about him for a second. But Ryan Lizza, I haven't spoken to Ryan. I'm not making any kind of comments about his political stance, but he's been writing a lot about Stephen Biss. Ryan was sued. I forget which publication he was with, but he was sued by Stephen Biss and has now been investigating him quite extensively. What can you say, if anything, about Stephen Biss and Devin Nunes and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I didn't realize that Biss was connected to Bongino and Kash Patel,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And um,
And Trump.
I'm more familiar with them than Devin Nunes, but uh, yeah, it's kind of alarming. Like, what's going? I mean, it just makes you think there's more to the story than
I
what
agree.
we're aware of.
I
The
agree.
last I heard is that Biss is in a nursing home, but I haven't checked in on him in quite a while, so I am tempted to reach back out. I called the nursing home and asked to speak to him, and they said he was sleeping, but I could call back. And I just gave the information to my lawyer and never followed up. But now I am quite curious.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to ask your opinion, and you'll have a lot of experience with this. I've observed this. When someone is ill and you're their doctor and you prescribe a treatment or whatever it is, and then they have a good outcome, they recover, their strength is restored, their confidence in their health is restored, there's a certain relationship between the doctor and the patient where, you could tell somebody that they need to stand on their head and stick a garden hose up their butt, and that's the treatment. Okay, doc, I'll do it. The person becomes very deferential to a doctor who they trust. And similar to that, in your firsthand experience, I'm asking if you agree with this. When you have a lawyer, when you have a legal case where you're the doctor, you have no expertise in law, no ability to go into court and know what to do, in the same way that a patient doesn't know how to cure their ailment. When you get a good outcome from that lawyer, you feel very much at their mercy, very deferential to that lawyer. I have observed that Donald Trump has a tendency to do this with certain lawyers, for instance, who maybe got him a good outcome in the Stormy Daniels case. Have you seen any of this? Do you agree with any of that?
I definitely agree with it on the medical front. One thing I keep talking about is, how did Greg Abbott allow Texas to become the first in the country to mandate the shots? So basically, from what I understand, and this is coming from Methodists, I have this on video, is that Greg Abbott encouraged Methodists. And I'm like, how did this happen in Texas? Because basically it paved the way for the rest of the country. And my theory is it's because he's in a wheelchair and he's very devoted to his doctors, which is totally understandable. I mean, I completely get it. And there's no reason not to doubt them. And he's having, his doctors, his medical team tell him, we've got to get these shots, and he's on board with it. And you are vulnerable when people with severe chronic medical conditions are very loyal to their doctors,
Right.
And deferential. And I'm sure the same thing goes with attorneys, because I can tell you, being thrust into all this, very naive about how all this works. You don't even know how to tell who's a good lawyer and not a good lawyer until it's too late.
That's exactly right.
Unfortunately, I learned it's too late.
I always say that doctors, lawyers, and auto mechanics, you never know when you have a bad one until it's too late. And it's an unfortunate fact of life. But I'm glad that you feel that way, because it's very, very clear to me. And a lot of people can't understand why Donald Trump made Kash Patel the director of the FBI. And I think it's because Kash Patel was the lead investigator or something like that, working with Devin Nunes when they were investigating the so-called Russia hoax. And because the stakes were so high, it could have destroyed Donald Trump's presidency, taken away his freedom, all his money. This is like lawfare, as you pointed out. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, these guys were closely associated with Stephen Biss. In fact, Kash Patel, a lot of people don't know this, but there is a Kash Foundation that Kash Patel is the director of, or something like that. Let's just take a look at this real quick. And there are individuals involved. Jesse Banal is one of the board directors, or he was at a time, one of the board directors of this Kash Foundation. It's got $2.5 million in there. And Banal is an attorney who took over a lot of Stephen Biss's cases after Biss was incapacitated. So I'm not making any kind of accusation of Jesse Banal, but it just seems this guy, Andrew Ollis, is also an attorney. William Onofre, I believe, is also an attorney. And they own media companies that receive a lot of money. Envision Marketing, 1&O LLC. This, to me, and again, this is my opinion, pure opinion, I haven't proven this in court, but this looks to me like self-dealing through this nonprofit, 501c3, I believe this one is. And it's just all very questionable when people wonder why perhaps the FBI isn't doing certain things if Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or whatever it is that, there's no there. It's all very curious. Wouldn't you say, Doctor?
What is the purpose of the Kash Foundation? What are they?
Seems to be lining the pockets of Kash Patel and his legal associates there, as far as I can tell. But the stated purpose is to support educational and legal efforts needed to facilitate government transparency with the goal of creating a healthier relationship between the U.S. federal government and American citizens. It sounds vague to me.
Interesting.
Yeah. So where do you see things going in your legal battle? What's up next for you in this ongoing battle?
Well, I'm still tangled up with the Texas Medical Board. So they have been, when I resigned from Methodist, I was turned into the medical board because I resigned while I was supposedly under investigation. And you're not allowed to resign while you're under investigation. But the purpose of that is, if you do something, commit blatant malpractice, you hurt a patient, and then you resign all of a sudden, that's the purpose of that. This had nothing to do with a patient. It just had to do with them trying to destroy my reputation. And so anyway, I got reported to the board for that. And then at the same time, and wrapped up in the same complaint, they went after me for trying to help a patient who was dying in the hospital, who sued the hospital to get ivermectin. And I was part of that lawsuit. And I was the expert witness and the prescribing doctor. And so the court ordered the hospital, Texas Yulee Hospital, to grant me access to the ICU, to grant me emergency temporary privileges. The hospital defied the court order. The attorney for the patient told me we were good to go, that we could send the nurse to the hospital to give the medication because we had the court order. And she was greeted by the police and turned away, but
Whoa.
there was not a scene. It was calm and no one was hurt. But they turned me in the medical board for that. And the medical board ruled against me and issued me a public reprimand.
Wow.
Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but it is on my permanent record. So anybody can look it up and see that I'm, a publicly shamed doctor. So I'm fighting that, have issued an appeal to the state district court. I'm also suing the Federation of State Medical Boards. I'm a co-plaintiff with 3 other doctors. The Federation of State Medical Boards is a private entity that somehow has control over all 50 state medical boards. It's not a government organization, but during the pandemic, they issued a proclamation to go after doctors for spreading misinformation. And so many of us were pursued by our medical boards. 2 of the plaintiffs actually lost their medical licenses.
Wow.
So we are suing them over free speech issues.
So what's the name of that thing again?
It's called FSMB, Federation of State Medical Boards.
And is that a nonprofit?
It is a nonprofit.
Oh boy.
But it has, has bylaws. They can kick medical boards out. They issue the USMLE licensing exams.
Huh.
Yeah, what's that number say?
20 million, but that was from years ago. It's up to 84 million in net assets. This looks like it needs some investigation. Who is Dr. Humayun Chaudhry?
He was the former head of HHS, actually.
Oh boy, this thing needs
Yes.
to be investigated.
Yeah.
See, this is so sketchy, Dr. Bowden. We have this entire nonprofit industry is just rife with people who are, well, these salaries are not outrageous, but still, this is $84 million. What's the purpose of this thing? To control every medical board? I mean, this is a subversive net. Oh, here's where all the money is. The chief assessment is getting $330,000 plus a $60,000 spiff there. These people are all getting huge 6-figure salaries over here to go and jam up legitimate doctors like you by basically, yeah, there's some investigating to be done here. My opinion, of course.
Yes. So we're hoping that we'll get to discovery and figure out what's going on behind the scenes.
So you are really not just fighting for people's health, you're fighting for justice. I think it's very important for people to follow you on X at Mary Bowden MD and watch your podcast. What would you say is the best way for people to follow you and support you? They can buy your book, of course, right?
Yes, thank you. The book comes out in May. It's probably part one. There should be a sequel because sort of how I survived the pandemic, and I hope that I will actually triumph because there's a lot still that we need to do. I don't think the general public realizes that we are not protected from mandates in the future. Houston Methodist, there was a big lawsuit brought on by Jennifer Bridges, who was a nurse that got fired over the mandates. She sued Methodist along with 116 employees. And unfortunately, that lawsuit just died a couple of days ago. It was, they asked the Supreme Court to look at it, and the Supreme Court denied it. There was another lawsuit like it out of Galveston with Shriners Hospital, also was shut down. There are 15 more lawsuits out there that are still being decided upon. But if none of them prevail, there's no precedent. Basically, all that happened is, if anything, they've been empowered and they could do it again. There are efforts to pass laws, but people don't realize Russia has a federal law that protects all of its citizens from any sort of medical mandate. Full stop. No exceptions. So they have more protections than Americans do. So it is, the pandemic is over, but people think that we eliminated mandates and that's enough and we're fine, we're ready to move on. But honestly, we are not protected in the future, and it will happen again. Maybe not under Trump, but we don't know who's coming next. But it emboldened them, it empowered them, it set dangerous precedents. So it's very important. Bodily autonomy is huge. I think we all learned that during the pandemic. I completely took it for granted prior to the pandemic. I completely took for granted medical freedom, health freedom prior to the pandemic. I just had no idea that any of this could ever happen. But unfortunately, without more legal wins, we are not protected in the future. So we need wins in the court. We need legislative reform. South Carolina there's a hearing on Tuesday. They have a bill to make ivermectin over the counter and a bill to ban mRNA. So there are states that are working on that. Obviously, I think the FDA should pull the mRNA shots off the market. They should have done it a long time ago. But if they won't do it, there are states working on that. 7 states last session had bills to ban mRNA. None of them passed. Only one got to a hearing. Montana was the only state where they even had a hearing on the matter. Texas, there were 7 bills to ban mRNA. None of them got even considered. They didn't get on the calendars. But it's super important that we keep fighting.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that these fat, drunk judges are having all this input into what people can do with their health. I mean, even more than doctors to some extent. This is what I wanted to ask you. Has RFK been helpful at all to what you're trying to do? Have you had a good relationship with him, or what's going on there?
I have never had a conversation with him. So, but prior to him becoming HHS secretary, we expected him to be the nuclear bomb that we were all waiting for. It was going to drop on Pfizer and Big Pharma, and the target shifted to food, which has been frustrating because he wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. He seems to have put the pandemic on the back burner. Now, people keep saying, well, there's things going on behind the scenes that we're just not privy to. We need to be patient. But, I personally think that we need to just keep applying as much pressure as possible. It makes his job easier. If that is true, and there's things going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to, and he's working very hard to correct all the wrongs of the pandemic, then applying public pressure actually helps them. Oh, and one other endeavor that I would love to talk about. So if you got the COVID shot at a hospital and then you went to the hospital after getting that shot for any reason, you could have stubbed your toe, you could have gotten a car wreck, you could have broken your arm, you could have even gotten COVID. The hospital was legally obligated to report you to VAERS. So it doesn't matter what it was for. They signed an agreement that they would report you to VAERS. Well, we have access to Medicare information showing and VAERS information, and we're able to match that. And we found out at Houston Methodist that at least 1,575 people presented to the emergency room or to the hospital after receiving their COVID shot, and Houston Methodist did not report them to VAERS. We can expose that this is fraud. It is. There's 6 years following the end of the EUA to go after them for fraud. And this is a model that can be followed for any hospital in the country. And there is a case right now, Deb Conrad, who is a physician's assistant in New York. She was reporting patients to VAERS, Rochester General Hospital, and she got fired because the hospital said she was reporting too many people to VAERS. Well, that case is in discovery right now. And if it goes well, it sets a precedent and it opens the floodgates for it will be a legal framework that can be used at every hospital in the country, because we know these people were not reported to VAERS. None of the patients that I've seen for injuries in my office were reported to VAERS by all the other providers they had seen. I was the one that reported them.
Wow. And, just following up on the whole media smear campaign, even here where they have to admit that COVID skeptics are starting to win in court, they're focusing on what they think is the downside, that vaccine access could shrink. Forget about the fact that the COVID skeptics are winning because they're being proven right, and the vaccines, you don't want access to it, but they're like, oh no, you're not going to be able to get this dangerous, in my opinion, vaccine because of COVID skeptics winning in court. Well, I mean, listen, doctor, the good news is we're not that far away from a time where you and I, even having this conversation, would have had this video deleted before we even got to the end, which we are approaching. And so at least there's some progress being made. I do like to try to, and I'm not suggesting that you aren't, but I do like to try to focus on the positive. It's hard to do in this climate, but I realize you're extremely busy, and I really want to thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with me. Is there anything else that we should cover that we haven't gone over yet today?
Well, there's one other lawsuit that's really important with Brooke Jackson, a whistleblower from Pfizer. She has been suing for almost 6 years now, but she worked at one of their research facilities. She was overseeing the process, making sure that they were following the protocols. And she saw concerning things like the doctors weren't blinded to who was vaccinated and who wasn't vaccinated. The patients were not given proper informed consent. She reported all this to Pfizer and the FDA and was promptly fired. So she is has a key tam case, a fraud case, and if she wins, it could basically bankrupt Pfizer. Now, Pam Bondi, their attorney general, normally the attorney general assists the whistleblowers in these situations, but Pam Bondi has swept in and is fighting to get this case dismissed. So this case is hanging on by a thread. There was a hearing at the Fifth Circuit that they're waiting the decision on. And if it fails at the Fifth Circuit, I'm sure they will ask the Supreme Court to consider it. But this is a big case that everybody should have their eyes on.
Yeah, for sure. Brooke Jackson, if I'm not mistaken, initially came to prominence when she was interviewed by my former associate, John Cullen. So I didn't know all those new details. One thing that some people may not know is that financial disclosures during the time that Pam Bondi was being considered as the Attorney General revealed that she represented Pfizer, I believe, as a lobbyist under Susie Wiles. So unfortunately, I don't think, I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving anybody legal advice, but my understanding of the functioning of a qui tam lawsuit is that it's an individual bringing a whistleblower lawsuit that the government can then decide if they want to take over. And it is the attorney general who would make that decision. So, I don't see that happening, unfortunately. That's a sticky situation for Ms. Jackson to find herself in, but thank you for bringing that to our attention, Dr. Bowden.
Yes, and one other effort to look at is there's an attorney that I actually interviewed yesterday, Brian Festa with We the Patriots. They have a case that's potentially going to be considered by the Supreme Court over religious exemptions, because there are several states that do not allow religious exemptions anymore. And his case is challenging that. That's also super important to protect the ability to have, in my opinion, we should just eliminate, no one should need an exemption, medical or religious. It should just be your right to refuse something injected in your body or in your child's body. But unfortunately, that's what we, in our country, we have to protect people with religious exemptions, but there's several states that don't allow them. But he's trying to get this before the Supreme Court, and if the Supreme Court makes a decision on it, then that will protect religious exemptions across the country.
Yeah, and it's very expensive. I don't know if people know this, but just even printing up the documents that you need to submit to the Supreme Court is like tens of thousands of dollars. They really put a lot of barriers, and then they get to decide if they want to talk to you or not. Could you imagine if the medical profession worked in the way that the legal profession worked? You could just ignore things for months at a time, do all kinds of malpractice and never have any repercussions. You could put a potato in instead of somebody's heart transplant, and they'd, this is what we decided to do in our best judgment. But Dr. Bowden, I really want to thank you for joining me today and for everything that you've been doing. It's an incredible fight that you've been in. I hope that people will follow you on X at Mary Bowden MD, and they can also purchase your book when it comes out in May. The book is called Dangerous Misinformation. Dr. Bowden is a warrior for your health, your family, your rights, the truth. Unbelievable. I'm pleased to have met you, Dr. Bowden. And I want to remind everyone they can sponsor Crowdsource the Truth by going to crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. You can also follow me on X at JG_CSTT and subscribe there. Dr. Bowden, thanks so much. Have a great day. And thanks everybody for watching.